"You're sure you packed the water filter?" I asked, hefting my backpack into the rear of my SUV. Sam patted the side pocket of his oversized pack. "Right here." And I grabbed extra batteries for the headlamps this time. Thank God. Last trip was a nightmare when yours died. I slammed the trunk shut, mentally checking off items on my packing list. 4 days in Blackwood Forest required meticulous planning, especially when we'd be miles from the nearest trail marker. We'd been plotting this particular excursion for months, poring over topographical maps and satellite images to find the perfect spot, remote enough to avoid weekend warriors, but accessible enough that we wouldn't need technical climbing gear. Sam had discovered the clearing beside a stream during one of his late-night deep dives into hiking forums. "This is going to be epic," Sam said, sliding into the passenger seat. He adjusted his lucky baseball cap. No cell service, no people, no bullshit. I nodded, feeling excited about the trip ahead. That's the point. The drive took us through progressively smaller towns until buildings grew sparse and forests dense. 3 hours in, hunger got the best of us. I pulled into a gravel lot outside a place called Oakley's Diner. Inside smelled like bacon and coffee. The place was mostly empty, just a couple of older men hunched over newspapers at the counter. We slid into a booth with cracked vinyl seats. "Well, you boys are up early," said our waitress, sliding menus in front of us. Her name tag read Fern, and the deep lines around her eyes crinkled when she smiled. "Coffee?" "God, yes," Sam said. I nodded. "Please." She returned with 2 mugs and took our breakfast orders. As she scribbled on her pad, she glanced out the window. "You headed up to do some hiking?" "Camping, actually," I said. "Few days in Blackwood." Her pencil paused. "Blackwood Forest? You might want to reconsider. We've got some nasty weather moving in tonight." Sam grinned. "We've got good gear. A little rain never killed anybody." "It's not just the weather," Fern said, tucking the pencil behind her ear. "We had 3 hikers go missing up there last month. Search and rescue never found them." I tried not to roll my eyes. Every small town had its warnings about the nearby wilderness. "We've been planning this trip for months. We'll be careful." "I'm sure those other folks said the same thing." She shrugged. "Just thought you should know. Food'll be up in a few." Sam waited until she walked away before leaning forward. "Dude, it's like the start of every horror movie. Don't go into those woods," he mimicked in a high-pitched voice. "Yeah, well, if we see any hockey masks or chainsaws, we'll turn around." I stirred sugar into my coffee. "But seriously, we've got the GPS, emergency beacon, first aid. We're good." "Totally." Sam nodded. Besides, those missing hikers were probably just weekend amateurs who wandered off trail without a map. By the time we'd finished eating, I'd nearly forgotten Fern's warning. We paid the bill, leaving a generous tip partly because of her unsolicited advice. Back on the road, the final stretch took us to a small parking area at the trailhead. I locked the SUV, double-checking that nothing valuable was visible through the windows. The trail started as a well-marked path, but gradually narrowed as we hiked deeper into the forest. "How much further?" Sam asked after we'd been walking for nearly 2 hours. Even with his stocky build, he moved with practiced ease over the uneven terrain. I checked the GPS. Should be just over that ridge. See how the trees thin out a bit? The forest opened into exactly what we'd been looking for. A small clearing nestled against a backdrop of towering pines, with a narrow stream cutting through one side. The canopy overhead provided natural shelter while still allowing enough space for our tents. "Fucking perfect," Sam said, dropping his pack and stretching his arms wide. "You can't hear a single man-made sound." He was right. The isolation was complete. Just rushing water, wind through branches, and occasional bird calls. We were at least 8 miles from the nearest marked trail, in a spot few people would ever see. We fell into our practiced routine. Sam collecting firewood while I set up the tents. By late afternoon, our campsite was established with military precision. Tents facing east to catch morning sun, fire pit dug and surrounded by stones, and food bag hung in a tree away from our sleeping area. Want to try the stream? I asked, eyeing the water. Might be able to catch something for dinner. Nah, I'm starving now. Let's just cook. Sam was already digging through his food bag. Besides, looks like rain's coming. I glanced up, noticing the darkening clouds for the first time. The air felt damp with the coming storm. We got the fire going just as the first drops began to fall, a light drizzle that wasn't enough to threaten our plans. Sam pulled a small metal grill from his pack and positioned it over the flames. Dehydrated beef stew or pasta primavera? He asked, holding up 2 packets. Stew. Seems fitting with the weather. As darkness settled, the rain remained steady, but manageable. We huddled near the fire under a tarp Sam had strung between trees, sharing dinner and passing a flask of whiskey back and forth. Remember that trip to Montana? Sam asked, his face glowing in the firelight. When that moose wandered into camp? I laughed. You climbed a tree so fast I thought you'd grown wings. Survival instinct, man. He took another swig from the flask. My grandfather always said, there's 3 types of danger in the wilderness: the weather, the wildlife, and your own stupidity. I was just respecting the middle one. Your grandfather was right about the stupidity part, I joked. Remember when you tried to cook bacon on that hot rock and it slid off into the dirt? Sam groaned. Can we please let that go? It was 5 years ago. The rain intensified, forcing us closer to the fire. We traded stories until the flask was empty and the logs had burned down to embers. I'm calling it, Sam finally said, standing and stretching. My back's killing me from that hike. I nodded, suddenly aware of my own exhaustion. Yeah, see you in the morning. In my tent, I zipped myself into my sleeping bag, listening to the rhythmic patter of raindrops overhead. Even though the ground was hard beneath me, sleep came quickly, pulling me under to the soundtrack of the forest. I don't know what woke me initially. The luminous dial of my watch read 2:07 a.m. when my eyes first opened. The rain had intensified into a proper downpour, but that wasn't what had disturbed me. Survival instinct, man. The voice came from just outside my tent, a perfect mimicry of the words Sam had spoken earlier, but with something fundamentally wrong in the delivery. Each syllable sounded isolated, as if spoken by someone learning language for the first time. I lay perfectly still. 3 types of danger. The voice moved, circling toward the back of my tent. Weather, wildlife, your own stupidity. It was my voice now, reciting my own words from earlier, but broken and halting. The hairs on my arms stood on end as I listened to this disjointed reproduction of our fireside conversation. Remember Montana? The voice had moved again, now near the entrance flap. Moose. Wandered. Into camp. I wanted to call out to Sam to see if he was playing some elaborate prank, but something instinctual kept me silent. Whatever was speaking wasn't Sam. It didn't sound human in the way it strung words together, despite using my exact tone and timbre. For several terrifying minutes, the voice continued circling my tent, sampling fragments of our evening's conversation like a child trying on different outfits. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. I lay motionless, straining to hear anything beyond the rain. Eventually, I caught what sounded like footsteps moving away through wet underbrush, fading until only the storm remained. My rational mind immediately began manufacturing explanations. Sleep paralysis, a vivid dream. My own voice bouncing back from the trees, distorted by wind and rain. Yet none of these explanations could account for the precision of the words or the methodical way the voice had circled my tent. I checked my watch again, 3:15 a.m. I'd been lying frozen for over an hour. The storm raged overhead, branches occasionally scraping against the rainfly. I told myself to go check on Sam, to confirm he was okay, but my body refused to move. Eventually, exhaustion overcame fear. and I drifted into an uneasy sleep filled with fractured dreams of voices calling from the darkness. I crawled out of my sleeping bag with heavy limbs, my body protesting the movement after hours of tense alertness. The tent fabric seemed too thin suddenly, an inadequate barrier between me and whatever had circled outside during the night. My hands fumbled with the zipper, fingers stiff from being clenched too long. The smell of coffee hit me as soon as I pushed open the tent flap. Sam crouched near a small fire, poking at the embers with a stick. His lucky baseball cap was pulled low. He looked up as I approached, the movement unnaturally quick. "Hey." His voice was flat. The usual morning banter was conspicuously absent. I dropped onto a log across from him, running a hand through my hair. "You sleep okay?" "Not really." He continued to look at the fire, jabbing unnecessarily at a log that had already caught. The flames highlighted the dark circles under his eyes. "Coffee's almost ready." I watched him, noting the tightness in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept moving quickly to the tree line. Something was off. Sam was normally cheerful in the mornings, full of plans for the day ahead. This quiet version of him felt wrong. "Listen," I said, leaning forward. "Something weird happened last night." His head snapped up, eyes suddenly meeting mine. "You heard it too?" The question hung between us. My stomach tightened. "What exactly did you hear?" Sam set down the stick and wrapped his hands around his knees. "A voice, outside my tent, around 2, maybe 3 in the morning." He swallowed hard. It was saying things we talked about yesterday, by the fire, but all broken up. Wrong somehow. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "Whose voice was it?" "Mine." He looked away. "At first I thought maybe I was dreaming, But then it changed. Started using your voice too. Said something about Montana and the moose. Remember? We were laughing about that last night." My hands had started trembling. I hid them between my knees. It circled my tent for over an hour. "Mine too." Sam finally poured the coffee, spilling some as he handed me a cup. "What the hell, Morgan? What was that?" I took a sip, grateful for the warmth, though I barely tasted it. "I don't know. Could be. I don't know. Someone messing with us? 8 miles from the nearest trail? In the middle of the night? During a storm?" Sam shook his head. "No way." We fell silent, both looking into the flames. I tried to create rational explanations in my mind, but each one disintegrated as soon as I examined it. Wind doesn't repeat conversations. Animals don't mimic human voices with such precision, and hallucinations don't happen to 2 people simultaneously with the same content. "I think we should pack up," I finally said. "Head back today." Sam nodded immediately. "Yeah, I was thinking the same thing." The relief on his face was obvious. Neither of us wanted to admit how badly we'd been spooked, but the mutual agreement to abandon our meticulously planned trip spoke volumes. We finished our coffee in silence, then began the usual routine of breaking camp. I was rolling up my sleeping bag when Sam called my name. His voice had a strange, tight quality that made me straighten up immediately. "What is it?" "Come look at this." I ducked out of my tent and crossed to where Sam stood at the edge of our campsite. He pointed toward the ground, his finger trembling slightly. Footprints. Human footprints pressed into the soft mud. Barefoot, with 5 distinct toes and a clear arch. They made a meandering path around both our tents, circling several times before heading off into the deeper forest. I crouched down for a closer look. "These are fresh." "That's impossible." Sam's voice had risen an octave. "It rained all night. These should have been washed away, or at least partially filled with water." He was right. The prints were crisp and clear, as if someone had walked through the mud only minutes ago. I touched the edge of one print. The mud was cool but not cold, certainly not as cold as it should have been if it had been exposed to the night air for hours. "Let's get out of here." Sam whispered. Now. We packed with a frantic efficiency, stuffing gear haphazardly rather than with our usual care. Neither of us suggested breakfast beyond the coffee we'd already consumed. Food seemed irrelevant compared to the need to distance ourselves from this place. Within 20 minutes, we had everything loaded. I performed a quick sweep of the campsite out of ingrained habit, making sure we'd left no trash. Forget it, Sam called, already shouldering his pack. We need to move. I took one last look at the footprints. Then I turned away, adjusted my pack straps, and fell in beside Sam as we hit the trail. The forest felt different immediately. Yesterday, I'd admired the ancient trees towering overhead, the dappled light filtering through the canopy and the rich, earthy scents. Now those same trees seemed to stand tall in a threatening way. Most unsettling was the silence. Forests are never truly quiet. Birds call, insects buzz, and leaves rustle. But as we hiked uphill along the narrow trail, I realized I couldn't hear any of the normal woodland sounds. Just our footsteps, our breathing, and occasionally the creak of our packs. You notice that? Sam muttered after about 30 minutes of hiking. The quiet? I kept my voice low, though I couldn't have explained why. He nodded, eyes scanning the trees around us. Not right. We pushed on, setting a pace that was just short of reckless on the uneven terrain. Several times I caught Sam looking back over his shoulder. I was doing the same thing, unable to shake the crawling sensation between my shoulder blades, feeling like something was watching us. The mist clung to the forest, reducing visibility and making the trail slippery. Twice I nearly lost my footing on wet rocks. Sam stumbled once, catching himself on a tree trunk. Neither of us suggested slowing down. You think someone's living out here? Sam asked during a brief water break. Some kind of hermit? I shook my head. Doesn't make sense. Why circle our tents all night? Why not just approach us? Maybe they're not right. You know? Mentally. It was a comforting theory. A strange hermit would be unsettling, but ultimately human. Understandable. But it didn't explain the voices, the perfect mimicry of our words. Maybe, I said, not believing it. From Sam's expression, he didn't either. We continued climbing, focusing on the physical effort required to navigate the increasingly steep trail. The exertion should have been grounding, a return to the known challenge of backcountry hiking. Instead, each step deeper into the forest felt wrong, as if we were moving through a place that had fundamentally changed overnight, or perhaps was revealing its true nature for the first time. Remember what that waitress said? Sam asked suddenly, breaking a long silence. About the missing hikers? I nodded, not wanting to discuss it, but unable to pretend I hadn't been thinking the same thing. You think they heard it too? The voices? I don't know. I stepped over a fallen log, pausing to offer Sam a hand up. Let's just focus on getting back to the car. We fell quiet again, conserving energy for the climb. The mist swirled around us, occasionally thinning enough to reveal glimpses of the forest stretching away on either side. During one such moment, I caught movement in my peripheral vision, something moving behind a distant tree. I turned sharply, but whatever it was had vanished. Sam must have noticed my reaction. What? Nothing, I lied. Thought I saw something. Just shadows. He didn't look convinced, but he didn't press the issue. We both knew what admitting we were seeing things would mean, that our fear was growing, possibly clouding our judgment. Better to keep it to ourselves, maintain at least the illusion of rational thought. The trail curved ahead, winding between two massive boulders. As we approached the narrowest point, I found myself instinctively slowing down. Something about the constricted space, the limited visibility beyond. I couldn't articulate the anxiety even to myself. Sam hesitated too, and our eyes met in a moment of silent understanding. We were both feeling it, the certainty that something was waiting for us, that we were being observed, assessed, and followed. I took a deep breath and pushed forward. The sooner we got through, the sooner we'd be back at the trailhead. The sooner we'd be safe. The forest was silent as we passed. My boots slipped on a patch of muddy trail as I adjusted the weight of my pack, struggling to maintain balance on the steep incline. 3 hours of relentless hiking had left my thighs burning and lungs fighting for air in the thin mountain atmosphere. Sam trudged ahead, his usual trail banter replaced by tense silence. Neither of us had mentioned the footprints or the voices again, as if speaking about it might summon whatever had circled our tents in the night. "We should hit the ridge soon," I said, more to break the suffocating quiet than to provide actual information. My voice sounded unnaturally loud in the stillness of the forest. Sam merely nodded without turning around. The muscles in his shoulders remained visibly taut beneath his pack straps. I checked my GPS again, a habit I'd fallen into every few minutes since we'd left camp. The blue dot showing our position inched along the thin line representing the trail. Progress was steady, if slower than I'd hoped. At this rate, we might make it back to the trailhead by nightfall, assuming we maintained our pace and didn't get... The air changed. I felt it first, as a sudden drop in temperature that raised goosebumps along my exposed forearms. Then I noticed white mist moving between the tree trunks ahead. The fog moved with unnatural purpose, thickening rapidly around us. "Sam," I called out, my voice cracking slightly. "Hold up." He turned, his expression changing from annoyance to concern as he registered the wall of fog rolling toward us. What the hell? Where did that come from? Within seconds, visibility dropped dramatically. The trees 20 feet ahead vanished in the fog, then those 15 feet away, then 10. The forest disappeared around us until we could only see about 6 feet in any direction. I pulled my jacket tighter, surprised by how cold it had become. "This isn't normal." "No shit," Sam muttered, moving closer to me. "Check the GPS. Are we still on trail?" I glanced down at the device and looked confused. According to the screen, we'd drifted nearly half a mile east of where we should be. "That can't be right," I said, tapping the screen. "We've been following the trail markers. We can't be this far off." Sam peered over my shoulder at the display. "GPS glitch, maybe?" Maybe. But I didn't believe it. The device had never failed us before, and there was nothing about these conditions that should interfere with satellite reception. I tapped the recalibration button anyway, watching as the device searched for a better signal. "We need to head west," I said, pointing in what I hoped was the right direction. "Back toward the main trail." Sam squinted into the thick fog. "I can't even see which way is which." I pulled out my compass, relieved to find it working correctly. "This way," I said, orienting us westward. "Stay close." We pushed forward into the fog, moving cautiously. We could only see our bodies and the ground immediately beneath our feet. Every tree suddenly appeared out of the fog, forcing us to weave an unpredictable path. That's when I heard it. "This way," my own voice repeated from somewhere in the fog behind us, with perfect intonation but slightly delayed. "Stay close." I froze mid-step, my hand instinctively grabbing Sam's sleeve. He'd heard it too. His wide eyes met mine in silent confirmation. "It's back," he whispered. "We need to head west." My voice called from a different direction now. The words stretched and distorted slightly as if spoken underwater. "Back toward the main trail." Sam's breathing quickened. "Morgan, what the fuck is happening?" Before I could answer, his own words repeated from the fog to our left. "Morgan, what the fuck is happening?" The mimicry was flawless, capturing Sam's distinctive pitch and the slight tremor of fear. Another voice joined in from somewhere else in the fog. "That can't be right." My voice again, but with odd pauses between words. Then another. "GPS glitch, maybe?" Sam's voice, but higher. Within moments, a chorus of whispers surrounded us, our own voices coming from every direction, overlapping and creating a confusing mix of sounds. Some repeated recent phrases, others pulled from our earlier conversations. fragments from our fireside chat the previous night, comments made during our morning escape, and even routine hiking observations from the past few hours. I can't do this," Sam sputtered, backing away from me, his hands pressed against his ears. His eyes darted wildly between the invisible sources of the voices. "Make it stop." "Sam, wait." I reached for him, but he turned and bolted into the fog. "Sam!" My shout was immediately repeated by multiple voices. "Sam! Sam! Sam!" Each repetition more distorted than the last, transforming from a call to something like mocking laughter. "Stay together!" I yelled after him, but he was already gone, disappeared into the thick fog. The words bounced back at me from unseen mouths. "Stay together. Stay together. Stay together." I stood paralyzed for a moment, realizing I'd just made a critical error. The voices were using our words against us, and I'd given them more ammunition by yelling. The smart move would have been to stay silent, but it was too late for that realization to help. Gripping my compass tightly, I plunged into the fog in the direction Sam had disappeared. "Sam," I called, trying to keep my voice lower. "Sam, slow down." The responses came instantly, multiplied and warped. "Sam, slow down. Sam, slow. Down, down, down." I pushed forward, straining to hear any genuine sound of my friend over the mocking chorus. The fog felt cold and damp against my skin. I checked the compass every few steps, trying to maintain my direction even with the confusing, thick fog. Time stretched as I searched. 5 minutes became 10, then 15 excruciating minutes of desperate calling and listening. The voices never stopped, growing more distorted and numerous. They began experimenting with inflections, changing the emphasis on words, making our simple phrases sound sinister, pleading, and coldly amused. "Morgan?" I heard from directly ahead, Sam's voice, but unusually flat. "Morgan, help me." I hesitated, unsure if it was another trick. "Sam, is that really you?" The response came from behind me. "Is that really you? Really you? Really you?" Then ahead again. "Morgan, please. I'm over here." Sam's voice, more desperate now. I moved cautiously toward the sound, one hand extended into the fog. My fingers brushed against rough bark, then fabric. Sam sat huddled at the base of a massive pine tree, knees pulled to his chest, body trembling visibly. I felt intense relief. "Thank God," I said, kneeling beside him. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head, not looking up. "They kept calling me," he whispered, "using your voice, saying you were injured, saying you needed help. I didn't know what was real." I gripped his shoulder, feeling that he was real and solid. "I'm here now. The actual me." Sam finally looked at me, his face pale with fear and exhaustion. "What are these things, Morgan? What do they want?" "I don't know," I admitted, settling beside him against the tree trunk. The voices continued around us, but seemed to have moved slightly farther away, as if giving us space while they regrouped. "But they're using our words, our fear. They're learning from us." Sam nodded slowly. "I noticed that. The more we talk, the more they have to work with." A terrible understanding passed between us. We were helping whatever hunted us. Every panicked question, every shouted warning, and every expression of fear gave them more to use against us. I leaned closer to Sam, lowering my voice to the barest whisper. "We need to stay quiet. No more talking unless absolutely necessary. Hand signals for direction. Tap for attention." He nodded, eyes darting nervously around us at the thick fog. I pulled out the map and GPS, checked our position again, and pointed westward. Sam gave a curt nod of understanding. We rose together, staying close enough that our shoulders touched. I put the compass in my palm where we both could see it and pointed us in the correct direction. Step by step, we moved through the fog in silence. The voices didn't stop, but they began to repeat the same phrases over and over, no longer getting fresh material from us. I focused on my breathing, on the rhythm of our footsteps, on the needle of the compass. Anything to block out the disembodied whispers that followed our every move. Progress was agonizingly slow. Every few minutes I checked the GPS, hoping to see us moving closer to the trail. Instead, I watched in growing frustration as our path meandered, even though we tried our best to maintain a straight line. The fog disoriented us, making every direction look identical. Twice, we spotted our own boot prints in a patch of mud, confirming my worst fear. We were walking in circles. After the second time crossing our tracks, Sam grabbed my arm and pointed emphatically at the ground, his expression a mixture of panic and exhaustion. I nodded, understanding his unspoken question. What are we going to do? I had no answer that seemed adequate. The day was slipping away from us. The dim light filtering through the fog had taken on the golden quality of late afternoon. The prospect of spending another night in these woods with those voices sent a shudder through me. We pushed on, changing tactics by identifying distinctive trees or rocks and marking our path with small piles of stones. It helped somewhat, but the fog played tricks on my eyes. Shapes emerged and disappeared in the fog, human-like figures that appeared to be walking parallel to us, just barely visible. When I turned my head to look directly at them, they vanished. The sounds changed, too. Beyond the whispered repetitions of our words came rustlings in the underbrush, soft footfalls in the leaves, and the crack of twigs just out of sight. Something physical was moving out there, circling us. Sam gripped my sleeve suddenly, pointing with his free hand. Through a momentary thinning in the fog, I spotted something dark moving between two distant trees, a figure too tall and too fluid in its movements to be human. It seemed to glide rather than walk, its outline blurring at the edges. Then the fog closed in again, and it was gone. Hours passed this way, the strain of maintaining silence, of constantly scanning our surroundings, and of fighting the growing certainty that we wouldn't find our way out before nightfall. It all wore us down step by step. Sam's face had taken on a gray pallor, his movements becoming sluggish and uncoordinated. My own body felt extremely heavy, each step requiring conscious effort. As the dim light began to fade toward evening, I realized we had a painful decision to make. We needed to either find a defensible position to make camp or push on through the darkness. Neither option seemed likely to end well. Sam stopped walking and sank to his knees, his expression one of complete exhaustion. His hands trembled as he shrugged off his pack. I knelt beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. His muscles felt rigid with tension beneath my fingers. Our eyes met in the fading light, a wordless communication passing between us. The confidence that had helped us through countless wilderness trips had disappeared, leaving only the raw truth. We were lost. We were being hunted. And we were afraid in a way that went beyond rational fear. The voices whispered around us in the darkness, a constant reminder that whatever watched us from the fog hadn't tired or given up. It had all the time in the world, and we had only the fading daylight, our dwindling energy, and each other. A shape appeared in the fog ahead, darker, more solid than the swirling white that had surrounded us for hours. I blinked hard, not trusting my vision after so long in the confusing mist. "Sam," I whispered, tapping his arm and pointing. He squinted, shoulders slumping forward with exhaustion. We'd been walking for what felt like eternity, our legs heavy from the constant whispers around us. As we approached cautiously, the structure became visible, a small wooden cabin among massive pines, a ranger station. The sight of something man-made after hours lost in the wild gave me a rush of hope. The voices, our voices, stolen and twisted, seemed to falter as we drew closer to the building. The whispers pulled back, creating an unusual silence around the cabin. Sam's eyes met mine, a wordless question passing between us. I nodded. Whatever protection this structure might offer, we needed it before complete darkness fell. The wooden steps creaked beneath our weight, I tested the door handle, surprised when it turned without resistance. We hesitated at the threshold, both half expecting some new horror to greet us inside. The alternative, remaining in the open with those things, made the decision for us. We stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under our boots. The air smelled of dust and old paper, with undertones of pine cleaner and something burnt. Coffee, perhaps, left too long on a hot plate. I fumbled for a light switch, finding nothing. Sam unclipped his flashlight, sweeping the beam across the interior. A single room materialized in the harsh light. Desk against one wall, small kitchenette in the corner, metal-framed cot along the opposite wall. Everything covered in a fine layer of dust. "Check for supplies," I said, keeping my voice low even though it was momentarily quiet outside. "I'll see if there's a generator." Sam nodded, already moving toward the metal cabinets beside the small sink. His movements had the mechanical quality of someone operating on pure survival instinct, beyond ordinary exhaustion. I found what I was looking for behind the cabin, a small gas generator under a protective overhang. The fuel gauge showed quarter full, enough for a few hours at least. I pulled the starter cord, wincing at the sudden mechanical roar that shattered the unnatural silence. The lights inside flickered on, then stabilized. When I returned, Sam had arranged his findings on the desk: 2 sealed bottles of water, a first aid kit, some protein bars, 3 emergency blankets still in their foil packets, and a heavy-duty flashlight with fresh batteries. "Not much," he said, his first words in hours, "but better than nothing." I crossed to a squat metal box mounted on the wall, a radio unit. I flipped the power switch, watching the indicator light glow green. "Reach anyone," Sam said, his voice quiet but edged with desperation. "Call for help." I rotated the frequency dial slowly, hearing only static across all bands. Occasionally, the white noise would hiccup or pause, as if something almost broke through. But no voices, no human voices at least, emerged from the speaker. Sam slumped into the desk chair, raking fingers through his hair. "So we're still alone." "Not quite," I said, nodding toward the window where fog pressed against the glass. Sam stood abruptly, moving to the window. "We need to secure this place." While he began checking windows and the single door, I turned my attention to the desk. Beneath its dust-covered surface, metal drawers held what I was hoping for: information. Maps, maintenance schedules, weather reports, and several hardbound logbooks arranged by year. I pulled out the most recent volume, wiping dust from its cover. The leather binding had cracked along the spine, but the pages inside were intact. I began flipping through the entries, skimming at first, then slowing as certain phrases caught my attention. "Sam," I called softly, "you need to see this." He joined me at the desk, hands smudged with dirt from securing windows. "What did you find?" I turned the book toward him, pointing to an entry dated 6 months earlier. March 12th. Routine patrol of North Sector. Echo phenomena reported again near Blackwood Creek. 3rd incident this season. No missing persons reported, but several hikers claimed to hear their conversations repeated back to them from the forest. Installed additional warning signs at trailheads. Recommended temporary closure of trails in affected area. Request denied by central office due to insufficient evidence. Sam's eyes widened as he leaned closer. "Echo phenomena?" "There's more," I said, turning pages, going back years. November 8th. Search for missing hiker. Thomas Crane concluded unsuccessfully after 8 days. Last reported location near area with previous echo incidents. Family reported Crane called them the night before disappearance, claiming someone was stealing his words, attributed to altitude sickness or hypothermia at the time. Another entry, this one from 5 years earlier, July 22nd, 2 backpackers, names withheld at request of families, rescued from Western Ridge, both hospitalized for extreme dehydration and exposure. Reported becoming disoriented in unusual fog bank. Female subject exhibited concerning behavior, refusing to speak except to repeat phrases spoken by rescue personnel. Male subject said they were hunted by the fog for 2 days. Medical team suggests hallucinations from water contamination or toxic fungal spores. The entries continued in this vein, fragmented reports stretching back decades, each describing similar phenomena: unusual fog, voices mimicking hikers, people becoming disoriented or disappearing entirely. The clinical language couldn't hide the pattern of something deeply wrong in these woods. I turned to the final pages of the book, finding the most recent entry dated just 2 weeks ago, September 28th. Investigating reports of 3 missing hikers in South Quadrant. Team last seen at Blackwood Trailhead 10 days ago. Weather conditions unusual. Persistent fog even though forecasts predicted clear skies. Radio contact intermittent, following their last reported route tomorrow. Strange sounds outside cabin tonight, like voices calling from different. The entry ended mid-sentence, the pen trailing off in a jagged line across the page. No further entries filled the logbook. "Jesus," Sam whispered, running a trembling hand across his face. "That's the 3 hikers the waitress mentioned. And this ranger went looking for them 2 weeks ago," I added, feeling sick. Sam pushed away from the desk, resuming his work barricading the windows with anything he could find: chairs, cabinet doors removed from hinges, supplies stacked in precarious towers. I turned my attention to a large topographical map tacked to the wall beside the radio. Red pins marked various locations throughout the forest: ranger stations, emergency caches, trail junctions. A blue line traced what I assumed was the main patrol route. I located our campsite from the previous night, then traced our attempted escape route toward the trailhead. My finger moved across the map, following where we should have gone, then comparing it with the landmarks we'd actually encountered. "Sam," I said quietly, "come look at this." He joined me at the map, his face drawn with fatigue. "We're here," I said, tapping a small square indicating a ranger station deep in the forest interior. "But we should be here." My finger moved to a point much closer to the forest boundary. "We've been walking in the wrong direction. They've been herding us deeper into the woods, away from the trailhead." Sam stared at the map, the implications sinking in. They're not just mimicking us, they're manipulating us. Before I could respond, a voice called from outside, Sam's voice perfect in every inflection. "Morgan, help me! I got separated in the fog." Sam froze beside me, his actual face draining of color as his voice continued calling from the darkness. "Morgan, please! I'm hurt! I can't find the cabin!" Another voice joined the first, my voice now, calling Sam's name with desperate urgency. "Sam! Where are you? They're coming! We need to run!" The impersonations were flawless, capturing not just our words and tones, but the subtle emotional qualities that made speech human: fear, desperation, and friendship. These weren't the broken and disjointed mimicries from the previous night. These sounded real. "They're learning," I whispered. "Getting better at it." Sam moved to the window, peering through a small gap in our makeshift barricade. I joined him, following his gaze to the tree line where the fog was taking a new shape. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing, humanoid in basic shape but lacking definition. The details were blurred and indistinct. The substance of it wasn't quite solid. As we watched, it took a step forward. The movement was wrong, too fluid, as if its legs weren't quite solid enough to support weight, but instead moved across the ground. It paused, head tilting in a curious gesture that seemed almost childlike even with its strange appearance. Sam's hand gripped my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my bicep. I welcomed the discomfort as we stared at something that shouldn't exist. More voices joined outside, some using our words, others speaking in unfamiliar tones that must have belonged to previous visitors to these woods. They called in patterns that mimicked natural conversation, experimenting with cadence and emotional inflection. "We need to take shifts sleeping," I said, turning away from the window. I don't think they can get in, but we shouldn't both be unconscious at the same time. Sam nodded, his eyes never leaving the misty figure outside. I'll take first watch. You sure? You look dead on your feet. I couldn't sleep anyway, he said. Not yet. I didn't argue. My muscles were trembling with fatigue. I moved to the cot, removing my boots but keeping everything else on. The thin mattress felt incredibly comfortable after hours of trudging through the wilderness. Wake me in 4 hours, I told Sam. Earlier if anything changes. He nodded, settling onto the hard wooden chair with his back to the wall, facing both the door and windows. Sleep came with unexpected speed, even with the voices that continued to call from the darkness outside. My dreams were fragmented, running through endless fog, searching for Sam, hearing my name called from every direction by voices that almost belonged to people I knew. A hand shook my shoulder roughly. I jerked awake, disoriented, reaching instinctively for my knife. Easy, Sam whispered. It's just me. But you need to see this. I swung my legs over the edge of the cot, rubbing sleep from my eyes. The digital watch on my wrist read 2:17 a.m. What is it? They're testing the windows, he said, guiding me to the barricaded window near the desk. I peered through the narrow gap between boards. The mist had thickened to an impenetrable wall outside, pressing against the glass with unnatural uniformity. As I watched, a section of fog condensed further, forming what resembled a human hand. It pressed against the window, leaving no condensation or mark, yet somehow exerting pressure. The glass creaked slightly under the touch. They've been doing that for about 20 minutes, Sam said. Different windows, the door, even the chimney, like they're looking for weak points. Have they found any? He shook his head. Not yet, but they're persistent. I took the chair he vacated, settling in for my watch. Get some sleep. I'll wake you if anything changes. Sam nodded, moving to the cot. Within minutes, his breathing deepened, exhaustion overriding fear just as it had for me. I spent the hours of my watch moving between windows, observing the misty figures as they tested our sanctuary. Sometimes they would press against the glass with appendages resembling hands or fingers. Other times they would simply gather thickly against the panes, as if trying to seep through microscopic cracks. The voices continued outside, though quieter now, a constant murmuring background noise. Most unsettling were the moments when the mist would form crude approximations of human faces pressed against the glass, featureless except for depressions where eyes should be, watching me watch them. They never held these shapes for long, dissolving back into formless fog only to reconstruct elsewhere. Dawn arrived with painful slowness, announced only by a subtle lightening of the fog from charcoal gray to pearlescent white. The misty figures had withdrawn from the windows sometime in the early morning hours, though their voices remained, a constant chorus that had become so familiar that I almost didn't notice it anymore. I woke Sam as the generator sputtered and died, plunging us back into the dim, natural light filtering through our barricaded windows. "We need to move," I said as he sat up, looking no more rested than when he'd lain down. "The map shows several possible routes out of here." Sam nodded, standing and stretching his stiff muscles. "Did they get in during the night?" "No," I said, already gathering the supplies we'd found. "But they didn't leave either. They're still out there waiting." We packed efficiently, taking everything useful from the station: water, food, the first aid kit, extra batteries. I carefully folded the relevant section of the wall map showing possible escape routes through the forest and tucked it securely in my pocket. "If we can't trust the compass or GPS," Sam asked, shouldering his pack, "how do we know which way to go?" I spread the map on the desk one last time, tracing potential routes with my finger. "The map shows a fire road about 3 miles east of here. It's rarely used but connects to the main highway eventually. If we can reach it, we might find help." Sam studied the map, committing key landmarks to memory. East, then, toward the fire road. The voices outside had grown louder as daylight strengthened, as if excited by our renewed movement. They called our names, laughed with our laughter, and shouted with our fear. "Ready?" I asked, securing my pack straps. Sam nodded, his face set in determined lines. "As I'll ever be." We removed the barricades from the door, each of us holding our breath as we prepared to step back into the fog. The knob turned under my hand, the door swinging open to reveal the white landscape. The fog was thicker than ever, along with the voices that had learned to speak with our words. Somewhere within that whiteness, the beings that had hunted us were changing and becoming more than simple echoes. They were learning, changing, and becoming, and we were walking back into danger. I shouldered my pack in the dim light filtering through the cabin's barricaded windows. The pack was heavy, and not just because of the supplies. We now knew things we never wanted to know, and we were certain this wasn't just strange weather or a shared hallucination. "Ready?" I asked, checking the straps one final time. Sam nodded, his face gaunt from our restless night. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, but his jaw was set with determination. "Let's get the hell out of here." I'd spent the pre-dawn hours poring over the Rangers' logbooks, piecing together fragments of information scattered across decades of entries. The oldest accounts referred to them as echo spirits, or the mist people, but the more recent entries used a more fitting term: mimics. Beings that learned from observation, that studied before they hunted, that eventually replaced those they mimicked. "Remember what we talked about," I said, my hand on the door handle. "Original thoughts, strong emotions, things they can't copy easily. And keep moving east no matter what," Sam added, tapping the folded map in my pocket. 3 miles to the fire road." I took a deep breath and pulled the door open. The fog swirled around the entrance, almost seeming eager. The voices started immediately, a chorus of our own words thrown back at us, mixed with unfamiliar voices that must have belonged to others who had encountered these things before us. We stepped outside, moving quickly down the cabin steps and toward the tree line in the direction the map indicated was east. The compass needle spun uselessly in my palm, rotating through all directions before settling on a bearing I knew couldn't be correct. "Ignore it," I muttered, tucking the useless tool into my pocket. "We follow the map and the sun." The weak morning light filtered through the canopy, providing just enough illumination to navigate by. We moved in silence for the first quarter mile, focusing on putting distance between ourselves and the cabin. The voices followed, maintaining a constant perimeter around us, never drawing closer, but never falling behind. "Let's test it," Sam said after we'd been walking for about 20 minutes. His voice sounded unnaturally loud after our extended silence. I nodded, understanding what he meant. During our night in the cabin, we'd developed a theory based on patterns we'd observed. The mimics seemed strongest when we were predictable, when we followed established trails, used common phrases, or fell into routine behaviors. They struggled most when faced with the unexpected. Sam cleared his throat and began to sing. Not any recognizable song, but a made-up tune with nonsense lyrics that he improvised as he went along. His voice cracked on the higher notes, the melody wandering without structure or repetition. "Misty morning monsters can't catch me. No, they can't, because I'm making this up as I go." I almost laughed, even though we were in danger. Sam had a terrible singing voice, but that wasn't the point. The point was originality, something the mimics couldn't anticipate or copy from memory. The effect was immediate. The voices around us faltered, their chorus becoming disjointed as they attempted to follow Sam's improvisation and failed. The fog itself seemed to thin slightly, pulling back as if confused. I joined in, adding my own improvised verse that clashed horribly with Sam's melody. We sounded like drunk karaoke performers, but the worse our singing became, the more the voices around us fragmented and distorted. After a few minutes, we fell silent, listening, The mimics had retreated to a greater distance, their voices now a murmur rather than the close whispers we'd grown accustomed to. "It works," I said, feeling a surge of hope for the first time since we'd entered this nightmare. "They can't handle original thought." Sam nodded, looking around at the trees. "Strong emotions too, I think. When I was genuinely terrified last night, they seemed to back off. It was when I calmed down that they pressed against the windows again." We continued east, using our discovery as a weapon. When the voices drew too close, one of us would launch into a personal story, detailed memories from childhood, complex emotional experiences, private thoughts we'd never shared with anyone. The mimics could repeat our words after we spoke them, but they couldn't anticipate the unpredictable flow of genuine human experience. The fog responded to our tactics, alternately advancing and retreating as we moved through the forest. Sometimes it would thin enough that we could see 50 yards in all directions. Other times it would press in until visibility dropped to arm's length. During one such dense period, I felt Sam's hand grip my sleeve. "Morgan," he whispered, pointing ahead. Through the swirling white, a figure stood motionless between two massive pines, the silhouette of a woman with long hair, her outline blurred at the edges where the mist that formed her hadn't fully condensed. "Hello?" she called, her voice tremulous. "Is someone there? I've been lost for days." I grabbed Sam's arm, holding him in place when he instinctively moved toward the figure. "It's not real," I reminded him. "Please," the woman called again. "I can hear you. I need help." The mimicry was perfect. The catch in her voice, the edge of desperation, the subtle background sounds of movement as she moved slightly. If we hadn't known what we were dealing with, we would have been completely fooled. "My name is Lisa," the figure continued, taking a step closer. "I got separated from my hiking group 3 days ago. Do you have a phone or water?" Sam's grip on my arm tightened. "Lisa was one of the missing hikers," he whispered, "from the logbook." A cold realization washed over me. The mimics weren't just copying our voices anymore. They were accessing memories of words and personalities they'd already collected, using them as lures. "We need to go around," I said quietly. "Don't engage." We altered our course, giving the figure a wide berth. As we passed, it turned to track our movement, the face becoming more defined, features gradually appearing from the mist. Young woman, mid-20s, frightened eyes, chapped lips. "Please don't leave me here," she called after us, her voice breaking. "I don't want to be alone again." The words affected me strongly, the raw emotion in her voice. Was that real? Had they somehow preserved not just her words but her actual feelings? I forced myself to keep moving, reminding myself that whatever stood behind us wasn't Lisa anymore, if it ever had been. As we continued east, the fog deployed new tactics. Voices called from different directions, creating the illusion of multiple people needing help. Sometimes they used our names, mimicking Sam's voice to call me, or my voice to call him. The strategy was clear. They were trying to separate us. "Stay close," I said unnecessarily. Sam hadn't strayed more than arm's length from me since we'd left the cabin. By midday, we'd covered what I estimated was about half the distance to the fire road. The forest had grown denser, the underbrush more challenging to navigate. We paused in a small clearing to check the map and eat a quick meal from our dwindling supplies. "Something's different," Sam said as he chewed a protein bar. "Listen." I tilted my head, focusing on the sounds around us. The voices had changed their pattern. Instead of mimicking our recent conversations, they had begun cycling through phrases seemingly at random, fragments of dialogue from different people, different times, and different emotional states. It sounded like someone rapidly switching between radio stations. "They're practicing," I said, the realization chilling me. "Going through everything they've collected." Sam nodded grimly. "Getting better at it." We packed up quickly, eager to resume our journey while the mimics seemed distracted by this new behavior. As I stood, something caught my eye. A splash of color against the browns and greens of the forest floor, partially hidden beneath a fallen log about 20 feet away. "Hold up," I said, moving cautiously toward it. The object resolved into a backpack, not the standard issue black or green of most hiking gear, but a distinctive red with yellow straps. It was wedged beneath the log as if deliberately hidden, or perhaps dropped during a desperate flight. Sam joined me as I knelt beside it. "Should we?" I nodded, already reaching for the zipper. The pack might contain supplies we could use and, more importantly, information about what had happened to its owner. Inside, we found the standard wilderness gear: water bottle, first aid kit, energy bars, and spare socks. But beneath these practical items lay something more valuable: a leather-bound journal, its pages warped slightly from moisture, but still intact. I flipped it open, reading the neat handwriting that filled its pages. September 18th, arrived at Blackwood Trailhead. M and J are excited about documenting the echo phenomena. I'm more skeptical, but the accounts we've collected are remarkably consistent. Setting up base camp 2 miles in, then we'll explore deeper tomorrow. September 19th, first contact with the echoes today. Voices mimicking our conversations from distances where no human could hear us. M thinks it's some kind of natural acoustic phenomenon. J suggests infrasound causing auditory hallucinations. I'm not convinced it's either. The entries continued, detailing their initial fascination giving way to concern as the phenomena intensified. The writer, who signed only as K, had been part of a 3-person team investigating the legends surrounding Blackwood Forest. They'd come looking for the mimics deliberately. I turned the page and froze. A detailed sketch filled the right-hand side, done in pencil with remarkable skill, even though it was clearly drawn in a hurry. It showed a humanoid figure caught in mid-transformation, one half still swirling mist, the other half a nearly perfect replication of a human face. The eyes were the most disturbing part, blank and yet somehow hungry, studying the artist with clinical detachment. The accompanying entry was dated September 27th, just 1 day before the Ranger's final logbook entry. They're not echoes or hallucinations. They're something else entirely. They learn from us, not just our words, but our movements, our expressions, our emotions. Today, I watched one form itself into a copy of J right before my eyes. The process took hours, but by the end, the resemblance was uncanny. J thinks there's some kind of previously undocumented natural phenomenon. M believes they might be a form of collective consciousness manifesting physically. I think they're predators. They study before they hunt. I turned to the final entry, dated September 28th. M is gone. We found his clothes by the stream this morning, but no body. J thinks he might have fallen in the water, but there's no way he would have left his gear behind. The voices have started using his words, his laugh. They know things only M would know. I've tried to convince J we need to leave immediately, but she insists on looking for M first. The fog is getting thicker. They don't just take your voice. The entry ended there, the final sentence underlined 3 times with such force that the pen had torn through the paper. "Jesus," Sam whispered, reading over my shoulder. They were hunting the hunters. I closed the journal and tucked it into my pack. We need to move. Now. The discovery had shaken us both, adding a new dimension of horror to our understanding of what pursued us. These weren't mindless phenomena repeating what they heard. They were intelligent entities with purpose, collecting human experiences as if we were specimens. We pushed harder through the afternoon, ignoring burning muscles and the growing blisters on our feet. The fire road represented our best chance at escape, and every minute we remained in the forest increased the risk that we'd join the collection of voices in the mist. The GPS unit, which had been unreliable since the previous day, suddenly beeped to life in my pocket. I pulled it out, surprised to see it displaying our position clearly for the first time in hours. "We're close," I said, showing Sam the screen. "Less than half a mile to the fire road." His face brightened momentarily before a new sound wiped the hope from his expression. The voices had changed again, no longer calling from the distance but whispering from directly beside us, so close it felt like lips pressed against our ears. "They don't just take your voice," my own voice whispered, repeating the journal's final warning. "They don't just take your voice," Sam's voice echoed from my other side. "They don't just take your voice," roared a chorus of unfamiliar voices, men, women, children, all speaking in perfect unison. The fog surged around us, no longer content to maintain distance. It boiled up from the forest floor, seeming alive as it coalesced into dozens of half-formed shapes that rose and collapsed and rose again. Hands reached for us, misty appendages that dissolved when they met resistance but reformed immediately. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Sam's sleeve and pulling him forward. We crashed through the underbrush, abandoning any pretense of careful navigation. The GPS showed the fire road directly ahead, tantalizingly close yet obscured by the thickening fog. The voices rose to a deafening cacophony, no longer mimicking specific phrases but cycling rapidly through everything they had collected. Snippets of conversations, screams, laughter, and sobbing, all blending together in a horrifying mix of stolen human sounds. The ground beneath our feet changed from soft forest loam to harder packed dirt. The fire road. We'd made it. But the mimics hadn't retreated. If anything, they'd intensified their pursuit, the mist churning more violently around us as we ran down the center of the narrow dirt track. "They're learning enough to follow," Sam gasped between labored breaths. "The road won't stop them." He was right. The mimics had evolved beyond simple echoes in the woods. They'd studied us, our words, our behaviors, our emotions, cataloging everything that made us human. And now they were using that knowledge not just to hunt us, but to become us. As we ran, I glanced back over my shoulder. The sight nearly stopped my heart. The mist behind us had consolidated into more defined shapes, dozens of human figures moving with increasing coordination. Some still moved as if they were liquid, but others had achieved a solidity that seemed impossible for vapor. They walked upright, arms swinging naturally, faces becoming more detailed with each step. And leading them, nearly perfect in its replication, was a figure with my face. My own face stared back at me from the mist, its features still taking shape. The thing wearing my appearance stood 20 feet behind us, leading the procession of figures that poured from the forest onto the fire road. "Keep moving," I hissed to Sam, shoving him forward. We stumbled down the dirt track, our boots slipping on loose gravel. The daylight was fading quickly because of the thick forest canopy. Each time I looked back, my double had moved closer, its movements becoming more natural with each step. The others followed. Dozens of half-formed shapes coming from the fog, some still moving like they weren't fully solid, and others already solid enough to leave footprints in the dirt. "Morgan," Sam gasped, pointing ahead. "Dead end." The fire road ended abruptly at a maintenance turnaround. Beyond it, the ground fell away into a steep ravine, rough with rocks and fallen trees. Far below, I caught the silver glint of water, a stream cutting through the forest floor. The GPS had led us to a road, but not the one that would take us to safety. "We have to double back," I said, already turning. Too late. The mimics had spread across the width of the road, cutting off our retreat. They moved with strange coordination, keeping precise distances from each other as they advanced. The fog between them moved and got thicker, blocking every potential escape route. "What do they want?" Sam's voice cracked. He'd backed up until his heels teetered at the ravine's edge. I stepped beside him, facing the approaching figures. "I don't think we want to find out." The mimic with my face stopped 10 feet away. The others halted in unison, making a semicircle around us. Up close, the differences between it and me became clear. Its skin lacked the subtle variations of human coloration. Its eyes reflected no light, and its proportions were slightly wrong, looking like an inaccurate description of me. Its mouth opened. The movement was too wide, the jaw unhinging in a way human anatomy wouldn't allow. "Morgan Thorne," it said, my own voice emerging from its throat with perfect intonation. "Samuel Alder." Sam's fingers dug into my arm. His chest heaved with rapid, shallow breaths. "You ran," the thing continued, tilting its head at an unnatural angle. "Most do. Some fight. All contribute." "What are you?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. The mimic's face tried to smile, but the expression spread too far across its cheeks. "We are collectors, preservers, and archivists of what humanity discards in the wilderness." "We didn't discard anything," Sam said. "We were just camping." The mimic stared at him. "You brought yourselves, your experiences, your memories, and your voices. Precious things left unprotected." Another figure stepped forward, this one less clear than my duplicate, with fuzzy edges. When it spoke, its voice was female, sounding just like the waitress from the diner. "We warned you," it said in Fern's distinctive cadence. "We always warn them. That's part of the pattern." I felt a chill run through me as understanding dawned. "You've been outside the forest, in town." The mimics didn't respond directly, but a subtle movement rippled through their ranks, a silent communication passing between them. "How many of you are there?" I asked, frantically scanning for any opening in their line. "As many as needed," my duplicate answered. "As many as contributed." It took another step forward, extending a hand that was too pale, too smooth. "Your contribution is nearly complete. Your essence has been studied. Only final preservation remains." Behind us, loose stones skittered down the ravine face. We'd backed up as far as possible without falling. Sam looked at me, his eyes wide with terror and something else. Resignation. He'd read the same journal I had. We both knew what final preservation likely meant. "Morgan," he whispered. "I'm going to create a distraction. When I do, find a way through them." "What?" "No. One of us has to make it out to tell people what's happening here," he insisted. Before I could argue, Sam stooped and grabbed a handful of stones from the ground. With a wild yell, he hurled them at the closest mimics and charged directly into their line. "Sam!" I screamed as he barreled into the creatures, breaking their formation. The mimics reacted with surprising speed. Several converged on Sam, their bodies moving around him in a fluid way as he thrashed and fought. I lunged toward him, desperate to pull him free, when something caught my eye. A narrow gap had opened between two figures where Sam had disrupted their line. I hesitated, torn between escape and helping my friend. Then I heard his scream. One of the mimics had grasped Sam's arm. Where it touched him, its misty substance began flowing onto his skin, gradually covering his wrist and moving toward his elbow. Sam's face twisted in pain, and his body went completely stiff. I didn't think, I just moved. Charging forward, I slammed my full weight into the creature holding Sam. My shoulder passed through its partly solid chest, meeting some resistance, but still going through. The mimic's concentration broke, and it temporarily fell apart. I grabbed Sam's free arm and yanked him backward. His skin where the mimic had touched him was gray and cold, the veins standing out in stark relief. "Can you move?" I shouted, pulling him toward the ravine edge. He nodded weakly, stumbling beside me. The mimics had recovered and were converging again, moving faster now, their chorus of voices rising in what sounded like alarm. We reached the edge of the ravine. Below us lay a 15-foot drop to the stream bed. Not enough to kill us if we landed right, but enough to seriously injure us if we didn't. "We have to jump," I said, gripping Sam's shoulders. "Right now." "Right." He looked down, then back at the approaching mimics. "No choice, huh?" "None at all." The nearest mimic, my duplicate, was only steps away, its arms stretching unnaturally toward us. I locked eyes with Sam, gave a quick nod, and we pushed off together, leaping out into empty space. The fall was brief but felt longer than it was. We hit the stream bed hard, the shock traveling up through my legs and into my spine. I managed to roll, distributing the impact, but Sam wasn't as fortunate. He landed awkwardly, a sharp cry escaping him as his ankle twisted beneath him. "Sam!" I scrambled to his side, water soaking through my pants. "I'm okay," he lied, his face pale with pain. "Just twisted it." "Can you see them?" I looked up. The mimics had gathered at the edge of the ravine, watching us with expressions that ranged from blank to oddly curious. My duplicate was in front, its head tilted as it observed our escape. As I watched, one of them stepped off the edge, slowly floating down toward us. When it reached the flowing water of the stream, something extraordinary happened. Its lower half simply dissolved where it touched the current, disappearing completely. The creature's upper body remained intact for a moment, a look of what might have been surprise crossing its features before the rest of it fell apart and vanished. "The water," I breathed. "They can't cross running water." Sam grabbed my arm. "Help me up. We need to move before they find another way around." I pulled him to his feet, wincing at his sharp intake of breath when he put weight on his injured ankle. "Lean on me. We'll follow the stream down. It has to lead somewhere." With Sam's arm around my shoulders, we began making our way downstream, moving as quickly as his injury would allow. The water was shallow but fast-moving, forcing us to pick our path carefully across slippery stones and submerged branches. Above us, the mimics followed our progress from the ravine edge, their voices rising in a disjointed chorus that bounced off the rocky walls. They were sampling all their collected voices now, not just ours, but dozens of others, creating a scary mix of human sounds. Men, women, and children, all calling down to us with questions, pleas, threats, and commands. Some voices sounded decades old, words and phrases from another era mixing with modern speech. "What do they mean about preserving?" Sam asked through gritted teeth as we navigated a particularly treacherous section. "I think they absorb people somehow," I replied, helping him over a fallen log that crossed the stream. "Take their voices, memories, and appearances, make them part of the collection. Like those hikers in the journal," Sam said, "and the ones the waitress mentioned." I nodded grimly. "And probably countless others over the years. Who knows how long they've been in these woods." We continued downstream, the light fading rapidly as night settled over the forest. I clicked on my flashlight, keeping the beam low to minimize the chance of attracting attention. The mimics had disappeared from the ravine edge, no longer visible from our position, but their voices remained. More distant now, but still following. After what seemed like hours, but was probably only 40 minutes, the stream bent sharply and widened. The ravine walls grew less steep, sloping down to meet the water's edge. My flashlight beam caught the reflection of something man-made ahead, a concrete culvert where the stream passed under a road. "We made it," I said, feeling very relieved. "That's the main fire road." Sam's face remained tight with pain, sweat beading on his forehead even though the night air was cool. "They'll follow us. Then we need to move faster. Think you can make it a little further?" He nodded, though I could tell each step was agony. Not like I have a choice. We climbed out of the stream bed and onto the gravel shoulder of the fire road. The maintained track was wide enough for vehicles, cutting a straight path through the dark forest. According to the map, if we followed it east, we'd eventually reach the main highway. I shifted my grip, taking more of Sam's weight as we started down the road. His breathing came in ragged gasps, his injured ankle barely touching the ground with each step. "We should rest," I suggested after a few hundred yards. "No," Sam insisted. "Not until we're completely clear. They're still coming." I turned, sweeping my flashlight back the way we'd come. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty road behind us. Then I raised it slightly, pointing it toward the tree line. They stood perfectly still at the forest's edge, no longer misty approximations, but complete human figures. In the harsh light of my flashlight, I could make out distinct individuals: a woman in hiking gear, a bearded man in a ranger's uniform, and a young man with a backpack. Their faces were detailed now, their eyes reflecting the light in an unnatural way, and leading them, a perfect copy of myself, so accurate that for a disorienting moment I thought I was seeing my reflection. Only the expression was wrong, blank, patient, and watching me the way a scientist studies a specimen. "Morgan," Sam whispered, his fingers digging into my shoulder. "They look real." They did. The transformation was complete. Whatever process had begun with mimicking our voices and creating vague shapes in the mist had culminated in these perfect replicas. If we hadn't known what they were, we might have mistaken them for actual people standing in the darkness. One by one, they stepped onto the fire road, not flowing or drifting as before, but walking, solid feet pressing into gravel, making the same crunching sounds our boots made. Their movements were precise, coordinated, unnervingly human. "We need to go," I said, pulling Sam forward. "Now." We stumbled down the fire road in the darkness, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly ahead of us. Behind us, the footsteps of the mimics kept a steady, unhurried pace. They didn't need to rush. They knew we were injured, knew we couldn't maintain our lead for long. Sam's weight grew heavier against me, his strength fading. "Morgan," he gasped. "I can't." "Yes, you can," I insisted, adjusting my grip to better support him. One foot in front of the other, just like all our other hikes. "Except for the doppelgangers chasing us," he managed, showing a hint of his usual humor despite the pain. "Yeah, except for that small detail." We pressed on through the night, the darkness of the forest absolute except for the small circle of light from my flashlight. The mimics' footsteps continued behind us, not gaining but never falling far enough behind to give us comfort. I tried not to think about what would happen if they caught us. The journal's final words kept repeating in my mind. "They don't just take your voice." Whatever that meant, I had no intention of finding out. The fire road stretched endlessly before us, each curve revealing only more darkness, more trees, more isolation. But somewhere ahead lay the highway, civilization, safety. We just had to reach it. Sam's injured ankle gave out completely after another quarter mile. His leg buckled and I barely caught him before he hit the ground. "I've got you," I said, lowering him gently to the roadside. "Take a minute. Catch your breath." "They're getting closer," he said, staring at something behind me. I turned. The beam of my flashlight caught them. The mimics had narrowed the gap to less than 50 yards. They walked in formation, a group of perhaps 20 individuals spread across the width of the road. Some wore the faces of strangers, the missing hikers, I presumed. Others had borrowed the appearances of people we'd encountered, the waitress and hikers we'd passed on the trail in, and at their center walked my double, staring right at me even across the distance. "I need to carry you," I said, turning back to Sam. He started to protest, but the sound of approaching footsteps silenced him. With a grunt of effort, I hoisted him onto my back in a fireman's carry, his weight threatening to buckle my knees before I found my balance. "Just like that time in Yellowstone," Sam said, his voice weak but determined, "when I cut my leg on that rock." "This is a bit farther than Yellowstone," I replied, taking a staggering step forward. "But the principle's the same." Each step was agony, my muscles burning under the combined weight of Sam and our packs. But the alternative, stopping, facing what pursued us, was unthinkable. So I walked, one painful step after another, focusing only on the patch of road illuminated by my flashlight and the rhythm of my labored breathing. Behind us, the footsteps continued. When I risked a glance back, the mimics had closed to 30 yards. Their faces showed no strain, no effort, just the same patient observation. They didn't need to run. They had all night. I faced forward, adjusting Sam's weight, and forced myself to keep moving. The forest was completely dark around us as we struggled down the long, empty road. Each step sent shockwaves of pain through my overloaded muscles. Sam's weight across my shoulders had gone from uncomfortable to excruciating, but I forced myself forward, one foot in front of the other. Basic survival math. "Put me down," Sam muttered against my shoulder. "They're falling behind." I risked a glance back. He was right. The mimics had dropped to about 50 yards behind us, maintaining that exact distance as if connected to us. Their perfect human bodies walked in eerie synchronicity, no longer rushing, no longer needing to. "Not yet," I grunted, adjusting his weight. "We keep moving." My flashlight beam trembled from exhaustion, making jerky shadows across the gravel road. Sam's breathing was labored, with each exhale creating a small cloud in the cold night air. I couldn't tell which scared me more, the creatures behind us or the possibility of dropping him and not having the strength to lift him again. "There," Sam suddenly said, pointing weakly ahead. "Is that—" My flashlight caught the reflection of something metallic through the trees. The road curved ahead, and beyond that curve, the parking lot, I confirmed, feeling a sudden burst of desperate energy. "We're almost there." The knowledge gave me one last burst of strength. I staggered forward, my legs nearly giving out beneath our combined weight. Behind us, the footsteps of the mimics changed rhythm. They were moving faster now, as if they'd recognized our destination. I crossed the final 100 yards in a stumbling rush that was equal parts running and falling forward. The trees opened up to reveal the small gravel lot where we'd left the SUV days ago. It sat alone in the darkness, the only vehicle in sight. "Keys," I gasped, lowering Sam against the passenger door. "Front pocket." He leaned against the vehicle, taking his weight off his injured ankle while I fumbled in my pocket. The jingle of keys had never sounded so beautiful. My hands shook violently as I pressed the unlock button, the vehicle's lights flashing in response. "They're coming," Sam hissed, his eyes fixed on the tree line. I yanked the passenger door open and helped Sam inside before circling around to the driver's side. The mimics had reached the edge of the parking lot, their bodies clearly visible under the lone security light. 20 perfect human replicas stared at us with blank expressions, moving with the coordinated precision of a single organism. My double stood at the center, its face, my face, tilted slightly as it watched us escape. I fell into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and locked it in one frantic movement. The key scraped against the ignition before sliding in. The engine roared to life, headlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating our pursuers in harsh white light. "Go, go, go!" Sam urged, his eyes locked on the windshield. I threw the SUV into reverse and then drive, tires throwing gravel as we sped away from the trailhead. The mimics made no move to chase us, simply standing in formation, watching as we fled. We hit the main road at dangerous speed, the vehicle fishtailing before I regained control. I kept my foot pressed hard on the accelerator, desperate to put as much distance as possible between us and the forest. Sam leaned back against the headrest, eyes closed and face pale. "We made it," he whispered, as if saying it too loudly might jinx our escape. "Almost," I corrected, not slowing down. "Not safe until we're miles away." We drove in silence for several minutes, the only sound our ragged breathing and the noise of tires on asphalt. Each curve in the mountain road revealed only more empty darkness, but I couldn't stop feeling that we were still being watched, still being followed somehow. "What do we do now?" Sam finally asked as we approached the outskirts of the first small town. "Tell someone?" I let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. "Tell them what? That we were chased by fog monsters that steal people's voices and appearances? When you put it that way." Sam shook his head. "But those hikers, the ones that went missing, and the ranger, we can't just say nothing." I eased off the accelerator slightly as we passed the town's welcoming sign. Streetlights appeared, illuminating normal houses with cars and driveways, windows glowing with television screens. The ordinary world seemed unreal after what we'd experienced. Who would believe us? I asked. Best case scenario, they think we're crazy. Worst case, what? Someone decides to go looking, to prove us wrong. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. More people disappear. More voices for the collection. Sam stared out the window, processing this. So we just... what? Pretend it never happened? I don't think we get that luxury, I said quietly. But we need to be smart about this. Careful, and figure out what these things really are before we do anything rash. We fell quiet again, with the events of the past 2 days weighing on us. My body ached from exertion, and my mind was trying to make sense of what we'd seen. Scientific explanations, supernatural theories, and everything I'd ever dismissed as impossible now demanded consideration. I glanced in the rearview mirror, checking the dark road behind us out of habit, and froze. At the very edge of visibility, where the road curved back toward the forest we'd fled, a solitary figure stood illuminated by the faint glow of my taillights. It was too distant to make out clearly, but I knew with terrible certainty what it was. As I watched, it raised one hand in what might have been a farewell gesture, or perhaps a promise. "Sam," I said, my voice barely audible, "don't look back." Of course, he immediately twisted in his seat, looking through the rear window. His sharp intake of breath confirmed he'd seen it too. "Is that..." "Yes." The figure remained at the edge of the road, growing smaller in the mirror as we drove away, until distance and darkness hid it completely. By then I'd memorized every detail. The stance, the build, the face that perfectly matched my own. Not misty or incomplete as before, but solid. Real. "It followed us out of the forest," Sam whispered, turning back around. "How is that possible? I thought they couldn't leave." "I don't know." I accelerated again, hoping more speed might help us escape the consequences. "Maybe they're evolving, learning, and adapting. Like they adapted to look like us," Sam added, his expression darkening with understanding. What if they can go anywhere now? What if they're not confined to the forest anymore?" I had no answer that wouldn't terrify us both more than we already were. We drove through the night, stopping only to fill the gas tank at a brightly lit station where the sleepy attendant barely glanced at us. I caught Sam studying his reflection in the convenience store window, looking for... what? Some sign that he wasn't entirely himself anymore? I'd been doing the same thing. We reached his apartment just before dawn. I helped him inside, his ankle now swollen to twice its normal size. "You should go to the hospital," I said, easing him onto his couch. "And tell them what? That I sprained it running from mist people?" He shook his head. "I'll ice it. It'll be fine." I knew I should go home, shower, sleep, but the thought of being alone made me uneasy. "Mind if I crash here tonight?" His face showed clear relief. "I was hoping you would." We spent the day recovering, treating our various cuts and bruises, eating real food, taking turns in the shower to wash away the grime of the forest. Neither of us mentioned what we'd seen, as if talking about it might somehow summon those things to us. But neither of us could stop checking reflective surfaces, studying our own faces with suspicious scrutiny. That night, Sam propped his injured leg on the coffee table while I opened my laptop. "What are you looking for?" he asked, watching me type. "Similar reports, other forests, other mimics." The word felt strange to say out loud, giving formal acknowledgement to what we'd faced. There can't be just one group of them, isolated in Blackwood Forest. Not if they're a natural phenomenon. We spent hours researching, searching through internet sites about wilderness disappearances, acoustic anomalies, and folklore about doppelgangers. Most sites were obviously fringe conspiracy theory garbage, But occasionally we'd find something that matched our experience. Hikers in the Pacific Northwest reporting voices mimicking their conversations, campers in Michigan who claimed fog had taken human shapes, 3 teenagers in Montana who disappeared after telling friends they were being followed by themselves. "People know," Sam said, scrolling through a forum thread describing experiences eerily similar to ours. "Not many, but some. They've encountered these things and survived." "And most didn't," I reminded him, thinking of the journal we'd found, the ranger's logbook, the missing hikers whose faces now walked with the mimics. The news confirmed what we already knew. The 3 hikers mentioned by the waitress were never found, even though search efforts were extensive. The official report cited treacherous terrain and severe weather conditions as factors complicating the search. No mention of fog that walked or voices that shouldn't exist. Over the following weeks, we developed a system. We never spoke of the mimics directly, but we warned people when we could. Sam posted misleading trail reviews online, citing dangerous conditions in that section of Blackwood Forest. I accidentally spilled coffee on a friend's map when he mentioned planning a backcountry trip near the area we'd encountered the mimics. Small interventions and subtle discouragements. Nothing that would send people looking for what we'd found. 1 month after our escape, Sam showed up at my apartment unannounced. His ankle had mostly healed, though he still walked with a slight limp that might never fully disappear. "I found something," he said without preamble, dropping a stack of printouts on my coffee table. Historical records, disappearances in Blackwood going back to the 1800s. I sorted through the papers, newspaper clippings, journal entries from early settlers, park ranger reports, all describing the same phenomena: fog that moved against the wind, voices that repeated words, people vanishing without trace. "They've been there for centuries," Sam said, pacing my small living room, watching, learning, and collecting. "But what are they?" I asked, the question that had haunted us both. "Some kind of natural evolution? Aliens? Spirits?" Sam stopped pacing. "Does it matter? They exist, they hunt, and they replace." I looked up sharply. "Replace? What else would you call it?" He gestured to the documents. "They study us, then take our form, our voices, our memories. That's replacement, Morgan. And if they can leave the forest now..." We both understood what he was implying. We made a pact that night, sitting in my living room surrounded by evidence of an impossible enemy. We would never return to Blackwood Forest, never speak openly about what we'd encountered, but always remember the truth, always be vigilant, and always check the eyes in the mirror, looking for that subtle wrongness, that hint that what looked back wasn't entirely human. "Do you think they followed us out?" Sam asked as he was leaving. "Not just to the road, but further?" I thought about that final glimpse in the rearview mirror, the perfectly formed duplicate raising its hand in farewell, or welcome. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I think they learned something from us. Something important." "What's that?" "How to leave," I said quietly. "How to exist beyond the fog." Sam nodded, his expression grim. "See you tomorrow?" "Count on it." We maintained our friendship through the shared experience, perhaps stronger for having faced something beyond understanding together. We resumed our lives, our jobs, and our routines. We even hiked again, though never alone and never anywhere near Blackwood Forest. But something had fundamentally changed. Not just our perception of the world and what it contained, but something deeper, more personal. When I looked in the mirror each morning, I studied my reflection with careful attention to detail. Was that expression exactly right? Did my eyes reflect light the way they should? Were my movements precisely as they had always been? And sometimes, just sometimes, I caught myself wondering if I had truly escaped the forest complete, or if some essential part of me remained behind, preserved in the collection of the mimics. Whether what walked out was entirely Morgan Thorne, or something wearing his face with near-perfect precision. The doubt was impossible to fully dismiss once it started. And in quiet moments, I still heard those voices from the fog. Not just mine, but all the others they had collected over centuries. Waiting in the forest, watching and learning, becoming.